I judge performance or know how it's a high performing team based on the results. You know, for all the warm and fuzzies, I'm sure you sensed this in the book that I wrote, for all the warms and fuzzies and la 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 and all this, if you're, you know, in that book are words like tenacity and ambition, and I think work ethic matters, and I think results matter. I think that so much of the world's unhappiness and anxiety is based on the fact that we eliminated or demonized competition at the youth level. The idea that 8th place trophies are a good idea is a huge mistake in my one person's opinion. And so the other way I recognize if there's a high performing team is if they're winning. And in business, that means they're hitting their financial goals, both top line revenue and profit. For me, not only do I measure success financially, top line and below the line revenue, in a year, I try to look at it in a 3, 5, 7 year window, thus giving, and this is important to hear, thus giving a team the ability to over focus on happiness and retention in a given year that may actually hurt them on their top line and bottom line revenue. But if I look at the body of work, I'm always building businesses in perpetuity. You know, we talk all about building brand, which is a marathon, right? Let's build a brand. Yet, you know this, everybody here knows this. The business operators from the CFO down care very much about sales. And we do many things to hurt our brand in the face of hitting numbers and sales, because we are in corporate environments held accountable to stock prices. What's great about running private businesses is I've only been running Vayner for 14 years. There was 3 years where we barely made a profit. I was transitioning, we were growing up, I wanted to try some things, I made a lot of mistakes, we had some casting issues, we had some product market fit issues, but you know, had I been a publicly traded CEO, I might have not been able to make it to that 4th year in the window that I'm referring to, which ended up being our highest profit year ever. And so, you know, I think high performing teams look different in different environments. In the private sector, where you have more time, I think you can lean into a lot more of the emotion. In the publicly traded sector, you've got to find a little bit more of a balance, unfortunately, and that gives it a bigger challenge. Everybody here can talk all they want about the results, and the reality is we are unfortunately, this is what we signed up for. Just like athletes, it's a great thing to be an athlete, but when you stink and don't perform well, the media and your fans destroy you, like I did with my Jets players this weekend. And so, you know, I think, actually I didn't because I love them so much, but punchline is the results matter. I think the super ingredient, the super emotional nuance that most alpha winning leaders miss is the power of humility. For example, for me, with all the tenacity and conviction and accountability and self-awareness, all the traits that I talk about in the book that I have, conviction. I mean, one of the reasons I think I'm able to lead teams is conviction. There's no confusion for my 1,500 employees where I'm taking the company and what I care about. However, I think the only thing that makes me palpable, the thing that makes the whole engine, the gas, the electricity, the sun, that makes it all work is humility. And I think the biggest thing for a lot of people watching here is a lack of humility creates a humongous detachment between you and your team. And so something that's just absolutely not talked enough about, whether you employ 2 people and have a small business of 3, or you have 800 people in your department, is how significant humility is, because it humanizes you. It also makes people feel safe. When you're willing to admit you don't know or you messed up, it allows your direct reports and their reports to do the same, creating a much more emotionally inclusive environment. You know, we talk, thank God the world now talks a lot more about inclusion from a gender and race and religion and things of that nature. However, I would argue that the biggest issue in the world today is the weaponization of fear. Politically, parenting. I think parents using fear to parent the way they choose to is actually creating a lot of vulnerability in children and is the reason for anxiety at scale. And I would argue that in corporate, in business, bosses that use fear instead of humility, which triggers safety, is the missing trait of the majority.
I think it is one part of your book. You talk about your dad, right? Running the wine business, and you talk about that really, right? So how he actually had the culture and how he perceived managing in the older times and right now. So what is the difference? So it kind of touch base what you're saying, right?
My father was born and raised and lived the first 22 years of his life in the Soviet Union, which is a communist country where everyone stole from the businesses because the businesses were government owned, and the only way the human spirit could get forward was to take the enormous risk of significant jail time to steal, and yet almost every citizen in the country did so. And so you can imagine how dire that was. That led my father to not trust anything or anybody in any shape or form. So when he came to America and started his own business, when I was 14 years old, we lived 45 minutes from my dad's liquor store, and the first time I ever went to my dad's liquor store to work, he didn't say a word to me the entire drive. I was yapping, because I've been me the whole time. Yap, 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 yap. He didn't say a word. We pull up to the store, and my dad looks at me and goes, "Keep an eye on the employees, they try to steal." So my father had a very different perspective on his employees, and I used to judge him and be angry at him for it. As I got more mature, I became much more thoughtful and understanding of where he came from and what it meant, and so I have a lot of empathy for it. However, I was visceral to be the opposite. Not because my father was like that, but because my mother is like that and I share her DNA, and because I saw the damaging effects of how employees felt when they weren't trusted by leadership. And I've, to that point in the book, I talk about my inability to be candorous through the majority of my career until I repackaged it as kind candor. And a lot of that also had to do with sharing my mom's DNA. That's a shortcoming of hers, shortcoming of mine, and a reaction to my father. My father's incredibly candorous. However, he delivers that candor with a whole lot of spicy, and that's me being very kind. And that made me also visceral to confrontation and to feedback, and I wasn't able to calibrate it. These things all very much matter in the evolution of a leader, of a boss, and yes, I'm very affected by my childhood. And really, I'm the byproduct of my childhood like anybody else. At 14 years old, I worked in a retail store. By the time I was 18, I spent thousands of hours on the store floor watching customers engage with products. And I managed people since I was a teenager. And so, here I am 30 years later, 46 years old, and I'm a consumerist, and I'm a deeply passionate, emotional intelligence leader, and I'm very grateful for my circumstances.